So this week we're talking about Chapter 19. Chapter 19 covers westward migration and the New South and New West. One of the things that I really want to make sure that as you read this week is that you see that westward migration really came a lot out of the South. You get a lot of people after Reconstruction and after the Civil War who are moving west, trying to get rid of debt, and trying to find free land. And so you get a lot of homesteading and things that are going on. However, one of the big pieces that brings people to the West is the gold rush. The gold rush in California is a big piece. However, they're finding gold in Idaho, in the Pacific Northwest, in Nevada. And so a lot of people are coming out and trying to stake claim to that gold and claims that are in the West. African Americans also moved west, along with other minority groups. One of the things that, as you read this week, is that I want you to see that a lot of our history that we've looked at in the past have actually been silent on the minority voices. And so we don't see a lot of minorities in the West. One other thing that is difficult to see are the voices of women. And that's something that a lot of historians have been working on here recently, are minority voices and women in the West, because they were all here. In fact, several historians today say that it was a melting pot in the West, where you get a lot of Asians, African Americans, Pacific Islanders, and then these Europeans who have come out, and they're all working together, maybe not in a fashion that is altruistic. However, they are working the land together, buying and selling goods together, things like that. And so as you read this week, I hope that you're able to see some of those things. Frederick Jackson Turner is going to close the frontier. And I talked a little bit about this last week, but I think that this is important to understand, that he's going to say that there isn't any way that there's any land that hasn't been used. I think it's hard for us to understand that today, where we have big cities, but then we have these big patches of land that are not being used, that are under federal domain, or other pieces of land or spaces that aren't being used. Really what he's trying to say is that because each family would take up roughly a square mile, then we've got so many people in the West that, regardless that a lot of them are congregated into these urban areas, that you're not getting that we don't have enough land for all of them. If they were to move out and take a mile of land, that there wouldn't be any land. And that's really what he's trying to say. Later this week, you're going to be reading Frederick Jackson Turner's Frontier Thesis, which I think is important to understand and to see during this time. However, one of the things that I think that you should be looking towards is this idea of minorities in the West, and how they got here. A lot of them had to make big sacrifices, just like Europeans, to come to the West and to get here. However, some of the sacrifices that they made may have been somewhat bigger, because they left their families in the South and on the East. Some of them came without their families. And I know that we see this with white Americans as well, but minorities, at least African Americans, when they get to the West, are here by themselves. They're being treated poorly, and they've got to find a way to overcome that, yet still sustain life. Another theme that we want to look at this week really is this idea of urbanizing the West and watching this pop up. We talked about the Transcontinental Railroad last week. That's only going to make that a bigger issue as you get more and more people coming out from the East, or coming back to the East from these West Coast towns or cities that are starting to build up. This is an important piece as we look at that you've got people from all walks of life now coming to the middle of the United States and trying to have these land grabs, trying to find places that they can fit and where they can make a living. Several historians believe or not believe, but they look at it as a regional history. And if you look at the different regions of the United States, we could make a claim for that. There's a Pacific West Coast history. There's where it's wetter, yet you've got these arid land spaces as well. You get the Intermountain West, which is very arid, hot yet cold in the winter. You get the very arid Southwest, which is hot, arid, treeless. And we could really take a look if we were delving into history on that sort of an aspect. We could definitely take a look at that. Going deeper. However, this is a very general 102 course, and so we won't really delve into a lot of those things. But I do want to make you aware that that's something that's out there. Lastly, one of the themes that I hope that you're able to come across, I wanted to put a reading up that really told the myth of the West, and thought that Frederick Jackson Turner's Frontier Thesis was a better idea. But there's multiple articles out there that talk about that the West was not as wild as we thought it was. And so maybe it wasn't the Wild West. Death rates have pretty much been the same, or homicide rates. And so it's not like the West was people were running around with guns and posses and shooting people. That did happen. And I have numerous stories of that happening in Idaho specifically. But I think that it's good for us to understand that people in the West were really trying to find a way that they could sustain life in farming, in agriculture, raising cattle, trying to find ways that they could have land and that they could raise a family here. And we need to understand that as just people. What are your feelings as you travel around, as you're trying to do your daily tasks? Right, you're not out thinking, well, I'm going to go shoot this person. And that's really what a lot of the people were thinking in the West as well. And so as you read this week, look at those themes. The last section in chapter 19, chapter 19 is going to be more about Turner's Frontier Thesis and closing off the frontier. And so take note on there, and then read Turner's Frontier Thesis that I've posted on Canvas as well. Hopefully this will help you to answer some of the questions, or at least do the discussion this week. Have a great day.